mean, things ain't going good right now, and that's life. You know, you just kind of see what type of person you are, what type of man you are, and I wasn't raised to when things get tough, you know, to want to leave and get out and things like that. But obviously, I got my boys over there in New York and stuff, so obviously everybody goes with that. But no, definitely I feel that I'm here now and want to stay here, and I want to stay here, and I want to stay here, and
Gets it off in time, and it's golly, baby! Big time Nets win!
Oof, the only Net fans you know? The only Nets fans you know? Man. I mean, come on, man. Or are these guys?
Welcome back to the Only Net Fans You Know podcast. I'm Peter. Welcome to episode 85. I've gotten a very special guest, probably the best guest I can get around in the net sphere. He is also the host of Bleav in Nets of the Bleav Podcast Network. You could also check out his writing with Clutch Points. Big welcome to the show, Erik Slater. What's going on, bro?
What's going on, my man? I appreciate you having me on. You're a real G in the Nets content creation world, and you've been doing such a great job that, always excited to come on a show like this and kind of get to talk some ball.
All right, man. I'm going to jump straight into it. The Mikal Bridges trade has been talked about, written about over and over and over. This is probably the last time I want to talk about it until we talk about the draft picks at the end of the year. I had to get your opinion on this. I was literally about to go to sleep, literally about to turn off my light. All of a sudden, my phone buzzes. I see Mikal Bridges getting traded. I'm like, what the heck? And then I find the team, and I'm even more befuddled, and I wind up staying up talking to Nets Kingdom on YouTube. What were you doing? What were your first thoughts? Were you as shocked as I was?
Yeah, I mean, like you, I was getting prepared to go to bed because, I try to go to bed at a reasonable hour during the week. Like the first time the Nets did a crazy, it was a little bit later. Like it was the Kevin Durant trade was actually in the middle of the night, but like that was trade deadline time. So I'm like up and alert and, ready for something like that to drop. This was kind of more a shock to everybody. So I was just, getting ready to go to bed. And then I see that come across my phone and I'm like, okay, I got a long night ahead of me. And then I, immediately have to get into writing, do a podcast and stuff like that. So I was up until like 5, 6 in the morning that night working. And, I was fairly surprised, but, I thought that they did very well for themselves in both trades. Like when the first trade came across my phone, and that was obviously the Bridges KNICKS trade, my initial reaction was, okay, they got a lot. Like that's a lot of draft picks for a guy like Mikal Bridges. But in the back of my head, I was also a little bit like, wow, I'm surprised. We've had all these rumors about the Houston Rockets, and I'm surprised that, the Nets make this trade with the Knicks and they don't have control of their draft picks. So they're going to be awful, and those picks are going to be great for the Rockets. And then obviously, whatever it was, 10, 15 minutes go by, and then we get more reports from Shams and Woj that the Nets were able to execute that swap of the Phoenix draft picks to get their own picks back in 2025 and 2026. And then when that happened, but I thought, wow, Sean Marks did a great job here. And I think that he did very well for the Nets with those, simultaneous transactions to be able to get incredible value for Bridges from the Knicks, and then to also be able to get control of those draft picks back and be able to reset, with a proper tank and rebuild, to be able to pull off both of those things side by side. I thought it was a great job. But then you also have the Knicks aspect of this. And, anybody who, tries to deny that that's a factor in all of this, it was most definitely a factor in the price, in, how it played out, and a lot of those things. Trading a player of Mikal Bridges' caliber to a crosstown rival and elevating them to legitimate contender status while, kind of jettisoning yourself to irrelevance for at least the next season or two. It's a very tough thing to do. So I give credit to Sean Marks, to Joe Tsai, to everybody involved with the Nets ownership group and front office for, kind of taking their medicine, it's accepting defeat to a certain extent and resetting in a way that I do think from a basketball and a team building sense was the best move for the organization long-term. So that's kind of my long-winded, where was I at, and reaction to those pairs of transactions.
If the Bridges trade does not go down, does the Rockets trade happen?
I don't think so. I think, those are simultaneous deals that were, correlated with each other and together because, like I said, without the Nets having control of their own picks, that Bridges trade, I mean, they still got great value for him, but it makes a lot less sense unless the Nets are able to go into a tank and kind of reset, because half of the prize of the Bridges trade was obviously just getting that kind of value. But, you're looking at the picks that are going to potentially turn into a franchise altering player. And those are your own picks, which are obviously coming via that Houston Rockets deal. So the ceiling, is really tied to that Rockets trade. And I think that from the start, everything that I've heard and, everything that logically I think a lot of fans just have come to the same conclusion is that both of those deals were tied together. And Marks, I think you can tell by the, the proximity of where those deals were reported, how close together they were, that those were two deals that were very much put together in unison and were planned out, from the start. So no, I don't think so.
So I'm going to take it back to Bridges a little bit. And I've been saving this theory for the podcast. It's not really a crazy theory. I've echoed this before. I definitely think that there was tampering done for this trade. I definitely think that this was a long-term move. I don't think you see Bridges hanging out with Josh Hart on a Chipotle commercial right after that whole Knicks Nets game at the Barclays Center, where Bridges is visibly upset and kind of shitting on the Nets crowd on the Roommates podcast with Brunson and Josh Hart. I see all these little pieces coming together, and then we hear more news from, I think it was Brian Lewis. This might have been talked about at the trade deadline, that we know that there was another deal offered to the Nets, different players, different parameters, but still there was talk of having a Bridges trade to the Knicks. Do you get that far without Bridges talking to Brunson, who talks to Leon Rose, or vice versa? Am I crazy here? What do you think?
I mean, you're definitely not crazy. I mean, if we're being real, like, a lot of the business in the NBA is done behind the scenes and between the lines. So if you're looking, like, we're using a term like tampering, the NBA once in a while gives out, these very, they pick and choose when they want to give out these fines for tampering. Every team tampers. There's discussions going on behind the scenes during the offseason, during the season, every year, between certain players, agents, front office executives, all of it. So if you're looking at the Nets situation, you have a guy, Mikal Bridges, who's on a team last season where he, I think it's universally accepted that he's miscast as a number one option. The team is struggling mightily. He is, bearing a lot of the brunt of that criticism because he is the perceived number one option. He made some comments about Jacques Vaughn at the trade deadline that obviously led to him getting fired, amongst a lot of other developments with the coaching staff there. And he's in that situation. And you look across the bridge, and his three best friends, who he won a national championship with at Villanova, and, everybody knows that they're extremely tight, are playing for the Knicks, the team that is better, the team that is the toast of the town, and the team that, is on the track to being a legitimate title contender and plays at Madison Square Garden. Like, it's not difficult to see how there's a very, logical conclusion that can be drawn that Mikal Bridges had an eye on the Knicks and wanted to go to the Knicks. And, I think a lot of Nets fans wanted Mikal to stand up for the Nets a lot more in, those podcast appearances, the comments that were made from, by Josh Hart with, like, the Squidward meme and the Nets are holding you hostage and all this stuff. Like, I understandably, not a lot of Nets fans wanted Bridges to have a little bit more pride and to stick up for the Nets a little bit more. And he didn't. And a lot of people, took that as he wants to be on the Knicks, and understandably so. And I think on some level, we all knew that that's a place where if he had his choice, he'd be playing for the better team that is, the bigger franchise with his best friend. So I don't think you're crazy there. I do think that this was something that, Bridges and his management obviously had discussed probably during the season last year. And there was some reporting by SNY's Ian Begley right after news of the deal broke that Bridges requested a trade and told Sean Marks that he wanted to go to the Knicks and was willing to leverage his way there. Now, Bridges and Sean Marks have since denied this. But what I've always come back to is, regardless of whether he requested a trade or didn't request a trade, this is an outcome that Mikal Bridges is extremely happy with. And if he had his choice, I do think that he would want to obviously be on the New York Knicks with his best friends competing for a title. So in my opinion, that's all it really comes down to. And I do think that there was obviously things going on behind the scenes. How far back is to be debated, but this was a move that was engineered and was discussed before the fact. So you're not crazy in that regard.
Heading into training camp, what's the, if you have any insight on this, what's the feel around the organization? I saw Clowney in Summer League talk about.
It's an opportunity for me, so I can't, like, no shade to him. Like, that's my dog. I love him, but, like, to see us going into more of a rebuilding standpoint, that's an amazing opportunity for me, and I got to try to take advantage of that.
We see Cam Thomas being the obvious guy to kind of be the captain, quote unquote, being like an elite guy in the offense and really the face of the team, I would think. Well, what's the atmosphere around the team if you heard anything or whatnot?
Yeah, I think, if I was to kind of boil it down to one word, the word would be opportunity. There's opportunity for a lot of different guys to either step into roles that they haven't up this point to their careers, or to, step into a role a little bit earlier than maybe they would have in some other circumstances. I mean, when you're talking about a rebuilding team, the defining characteristics of, most rebuilding teams are youth, upside, flyers on guys who fit those, descriptors. And I think that's what you're seeing with the Nets is they have a lot of players who are going to step into roles where they'll have opportunities to do a lot more. Like you said, Cam Thomas is a guy who's going to be able to step into a, more of a lead ball handler role, obviously be a number one scoring option for this team, something that he wouldn't, probably wouldn't have been able to do had they tried to stay on a route of, being competitive or going back towards being competitive. So you have that aspect of it. You look at guys, like you said, Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, they're younger guys who their timelines now accelerated where they're probably going to get a lot more minutes than they would for a team that's trying to contend. So, that opportunity, it's not limited to those guys. Obviously, you have other guys like Tyler Williams. I mean, they signed Killian Hayes to an Exhibit 10, so we'll see what comes from that. You have Dariq Whitehead, who I think will need a little bit more time. There's some excitement, especially amongst the young guys with, getting that chance to kind of prove their worth and prove their value. And that's very exciting. And, I think that's kind of the vibe around this team is opportunity, excitement, and for the coaching staff, an eye on player development and kind of doing it the right way with those guys. And, while the team is expected to not be good and those guys are going to have a lot more opportunity, you still want to have a structure in place where they're playing within a role that they ultimately will for the team when it is trying to make a step back towards contention. So kind of that structure, keeping it all together, but, kind of letting these guys try to shine, on their own merit and figure it out as they go. I think that's kind of the vibe around the team. And I think it's going to be an interesting season from a lot of different standpoints.
I'm so happy you just brought up structure because we've known from previous seasons with Sean Marks that he doesn't necessarily just let the young guys just step in on the opening day lineup. We're probably going to see a Dorian Finney-Smith and a Cam Johnson kind of step into the starting lineup at least early in the season. What are the chances that you have Cam Johnson and a Dorian Finney-Smith making it all the way to the trade deadline?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, basically, like what it comes down to with Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith is that, I think a lot of people assumed, understandably, after this Bridges trade happened, they look down the roster, they look at the veterans, and these guys are going to be on the move. Now, I think a lot of people thought that was going to happen very soon after. And, initially, like that was my initial reaction was, okay, like these guys are going to get moved. They're going to liquidate more of these assets. But over, recent months, I've looked a lot more into it and trying to actually find trades for Johnson and Finney-Smith. And it's not that easy. Like, I do think that they will be traded, but it's not like you look at these guys and like Cam Johnson, 6'8" sharpshooter, Dorian Finney-Smith, bigger forward who can guard 1 through 5 and has shot respectably, during extended playoff runs with the Dallas Mavericks. You think like, oh, like there's teams are going to be, foaming to get these guys. But you look at the amount of money that they make, and it's not easy for a lot of teams to match these numbers for two guys who, while they're very good players, they're not necessarily major needle movers on a title team. Like they'll make an impact, but are they swinging you, towards a title? I think most people would say no. So, not a ton of title contenders want to pay, in Johnson's case, I think he's the guy that's going to have the more significant market where the Nets are really going to get back something of value. Not a ton of title teams, want to pay 20 plus million to a guy who, probably won't be in their starting lineup for a lot of these teams. So when I'm going across the league and trying to find these deals, it's kind of tough. But, just because trying to match that, I mean, Johnson's making $23.6 million next season. Teams are going to need to trade about like $16.5 million to match that number at the minimum. So trying to find that match, that's not easy for a lot of teams that are going to be in that market. And you asked, are they going to make it to the trade deadline? And I think they'll make it to around then, because a lot of teams that I've looked at, who could have salary matchers and who could make sense for a guy like Cam Johnson, have some recently signed free agents from this offseason who could be involved in those deals to make the money work. And if you were signed this offseason, those guys can't be traded until December 15th or January 15th, depending on some different circumstances. So when you get to those dates, there's a whole nother pool of players that are available to be salary matchers. And I think the Nets are obviously cognizant of that. And I think that you're going to get to that point, and they're going to have a little bit of an extended runway for Johnson, who struggled last season, to play, to show that he's healthy, maybe to try to, rehabilitate some of his value. And then when you get to that point, I think that there are teams that will either have injuries, or either doing better than they expected, or either doing worse than they expected. And there's going to be more of a market and a lot more activity around that time. So to answer your question, I would expect Johnson and Finney-Smith, especially Johnson, to make it, towards the trade deadline. I'd say that December 15th date is really a benchmark, because that's when a lot of players become available for trades. There's a lot more, activity starts to gear up, and teams kind of have a better understanding of where they're at with their rosters and where they're at in the standings. So when you get to that point, I think that the activity should really ramp up for these guys, these veterans that could be on the move.
I just wrote an article for Off the Ball Network about the CBA, kind of doing a little deep dive. And I think that the reason why these guys are still on the Nets and not on other teams is because of the CBA, that you don't want to get into a major penalty just to add a Cam Johnson, like you said, who's not going to be really a starter, is not going to be that much of a difference maker, right?
Yep.
So I look at that, and then I look at Ben Simmons, okay? $40 million coming off the cap. I just thought of this right now. Does his value go up if you go to a team and say, you know what, you're tax hell, you're over the second apron, over the first apron or whatever, you need some help here. We'll give you Ben Simmons. He's $40 million going off of your cap. And obviously we'll have to take in $40 million, but we can get some draft capital, and you get some of these deals that we're going to go on for 2 or 3 more years off your books. What do you think about, is there value there?
Yeah. All right. So to answer the first part of that question, you're talking about the article you wrote. And I do think that, it's a great observation by you. And I think it's a lot of things that it's a thing that I've talked to a lot of executives across the league, other reporters, obviously. And it is true that this new CBA is making it a lot more difficult to make trades. And it's going to result in a lot less trades and a lot less transactions, because there are penalties for, going into the separate apron. And, there's just a lot of teams that can't make trades because the money, the matching is different. Look at 2 teams that a lot of people thought would be in the market for Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith. The Lakers and the Golden State Warriors are 2 teams that a lot of people think, hey, like these guys will, these guys make sense for them. They're contenders, are trying to get better. They need shooting. Like if you look at that, the Lakers are above the first apron right now with their salary. So because of that, they can't take back more money than they send out in a trade. So they have to either match the money or they have to send out more. So if you're looking at a guy like, Cam Johnson, for a team that's not over the first apron, to match his almost $24 million salary, they only have to trade a little bit above $16 million. But for the Lakers, because they're above the first apron, they have to get all the way up to that $24 million number. So that makes matching the money a lot more difficult. And that really limits the packages and how they can get to that number, because they have to trade a big piece like a D'Angelo Russell or Rui Hachimura to get there, plus additional minimums to stack to get there, which they might not even be able to stack minimums either. So that just makes it really difficult. You look at the Warriors, they're hard capped at the first apron. So they can't go above the first apron, and they only have about $1.5 million in space below that number. So they'd have to match money. Like they can't send out a lot more money than they take in a trade. So same deal for them. To get to that $24 million number for Cam Johnson, they're going to have to stack, 2-3 contracts to even get there. And that might not even be enough. So to do that, plus give up draft picks for a guy like Cam Johnson, like if you're talking about giving up 3 players and a draft pick, that's really tough for a player of Cam Johnson's caliber, and that doesn't make sense. in my opinion, for a team like the Lakers or the Warriors right now. So that's just an example of how this is prohibiting some teams from making deals for players like this. If you're talking about Ben Simmons, I understand in theory what you're saying. Like, it's something that we've seen the Nets and other teams do, of taking on these salary dumps, helping teams clear money off their books in return for draft capital. Where I don't see it happening with Ben, there's two reasons. The first, and I think the more important of which, is the Nets are valuing, from everything I've heard and everybody I've talked to, the Nets are valuing their cap space next offseason and their flexibility. So they've kind of seen it through with Ben Simmons all the way to this point. And we all know how miserable it's been, the Ben Simmons experience, just with his injuries and his on-court struggles and all that stuff. They've seen it through for 3 seasons now. They're just about to be done and have that off the books. I don't see them trading, for contracts that are maybe going 2-3 years into the future. Maybe if it was like a 1-year deal on the books, like I think they'll do that down the line, but I think that they want to get this Simmons contract off the books and just go from there next offseason. So that's the first reason that I don't see that happening. The second reason is, we're talking about matching money. Getting up to $40 million in salary in bad contracts, like, teams need to have a lot of bad salary to shed. And the more bad salary that you're trying to shed, the more draft capital that you're going to have to include. So I don't think that there's a lot of teams that are feasibly going to get to Ben Simmons's number without giving up more draft capital than they want to in a deal like that. So for those two reasons, I think Ben either stays on the roster and just expires, or they agree to a buyout at some point ahead of the season. Like, those are the two routes I see this going.
That was probably the best answer I've ever gotten about Ben Simmons and trading Ben Simmons' contract by far. And another topic I'm so happy you brought up about the cap space. I think they're going to have like 80 or 90 million in possible cap space if they let these vets deals expire, if Dorian Finney-Smith does not pick up his player option and or gets traded and whatnot. With all this cap room, I don't see a deal like Isaac Okoro deal that people were talking about. I don't see that going down. And I've heard the same thing, in that they want to keep the cap space. For someone like Bogdanovich, right? Man, he does not want to be here. He thought he was going to be on a contender with the Knicks last year when he got traded over, right? He gets hurt. Have you heard about anything through him? I've heard that he might get bought out.
I wouldn't be surprised if he got bought out, because he's actually a guy that, like, contenders would want to sign, and he has a little bit of an incentive to maybe give up a little money and then maybe recoup it by getting to actually play some minutes for a meaningful team. So I don't know. Like, Bojan's a really interesting guy because, he's on an expiring contract.
And he was good last year.
Yeah, he's good, but he's 35 years old, and he's not a guy that I see having like significant trade value to where the Nets are going to trade his expiring and take back a contract beyond next season and get something back, get a significant draft asset back. Like, I'm not sure how realistic that is. And if that's the case, is he going to be happy, being here and being, either on the bench or even like playing minutes for a team that's going to be really bad? And in all honesty, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. I think a buyout, is within the range of outcomes. I think him playing, the season out with the Nets is also a possibility, and he could get traded, but he's a really interesting guy because you look at Cam Johnson, like, is 28 years old, has 3 years left on his contract. The Nets don't have to trade him. I think they will, but they could hold on to him. You look at a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, he has this year and then a player option. So I think that they kind of are closer to having to trade him, but he could be under contract for next season also. Bogdanovich is the guy who's expiring, and he's also, 5 to 7 years older than both of those guys. So he's an interesting player where, you could really only see him having like 1 or 2 more years left of actually being able to play in a playoff rotation. So, in a league where I think agents, players take notice of, teams doing right by people, I think it is, it's an unreasonable conclusion to draw that the Nets might try to get him to a situation where he could play, and try to get minutes in a playoff rotation and kind of try to see out the last good years of his career. I think that's a reasonable assumption to think that something like that could happen.
Well, the Nets have 2 point guards on the roster that are both about to have their contract expire. We have Dennis Schroder, who just came off a great Olympics. Ben Simmons, who came off a great Instagram posting session of him working out, despite playing only 15 games last year. Erik, who's the starter?
It's Schroder, in my opinion. I mean,
Ooh.
I don't even think it's a conversation. I mean, I haven't been talking to a ton of Nets fans. I don't know if there's actually people out there who think that Ben Simmons should be starting. I mean, I think
Because
that
of the money.
ship, the money is like that ship. Like, people use the expression that ship has sailed. Like, that ship has circumnavigated the globe like 3 times at this point. Like, there is no reason for Ben Simmons to be starting for this team. From a team building contract situation sense, or just from the actual like basketball sense, neither of it makes any sense, because he's a guy that needs to have the ball in his hands. He needs to have rotations tailored around him. We've already seen that the Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton thing doesn't work great. And then you're talking about the fact that he's never healthy, and they have to play 2 different kinds of styles when he is healthy versus when he's not healthy, which is something that we heard Mikal Bridges talk about when he went on that whole little rant about the coaching staff before last season's All-Star break. So you're looking at a guy like Simmons. Like, if he's doing anything, I think he's coming off the bench and playing a reserve role for like a few minutes here or there. And even that, I don't think that makes a ton of sense, because, if he's playing a reserve role, it could be as a ball handler. It could be as kind of like that point center. The Nets are going to be trying to divvy up minutes in the front court between Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney, and Day'Ron Sharpe. So that front court's going to be clogged. And then you look at, the point guard role. Like, they have another point forward in Trendon Watford, who I think should be able to garner some minutes as, kind of a backup change of pace ball handler. I think that he has, a lot more merit to be getting minutes next season based on age, based on production last year, based on health, dependability, a lot of things compared to a guy like Ben Simmons. So, if we're being real, like, I could see Simmons playing off the bench maybe a little bit, but, if, in my opinion, like, if I were running the team, he's not a guy that I think should, like, I think a buyout makes the most sense out of anything, because he's not a guy that fits the timeline. He's a guy that, obviously garners a ton of attention. There's going to be a lot of questions about, when in reality, the focus should completely be on these young guys as opposed to anything related to him. So, we'll see how it goes. But I think, in terms of a starter, you got a guy in Dennis Schroder, who is a good playmaker, who is a confident player, who can add some secondary shot creation, who knows, how to set up a lot of these young guys, and who has been dependable from an on-court standpoint, in a health and availability standpoint, for a while now. So he's the starter. I don't even think it's a question. And the Simmons thing, like, this is now 2 questions about it. We'll see how it plays out. And, it could go, a number of different ways, but I think that the certainty in this equation is that he should not be the starting point guard for the Nets this coming season.
Does Simmons' injury history affect you trading a Dennis Schroder? Because let's face it, Simmons gets hurt, but you want to trade Schroder. Do you trust having a Keon Johnson or Watford playing point guard for long stretches of the season?
Yeah. To answer your question, I think it absolutely does, impact something like that. The same way, like, we just saw this play out last season where, Spencer Dinwiddie was clearly unhappy ahead of the trade deadline. It seemed like his days were numbered. And, people were talking about that. And I had said, if the Nets are going to move Spencer Dinwiddie, they need to get another point guard. Just because you need somebody there to play the position, you need somebody who can actually bring the ball up, initiate offense, and add a little bit of structure. Now, you're talking about these young guys. You need someone who could add a little bit of structure. Now, you're talking about a guy like Schroder. He's a guy who has voiced his desire to be here long term. Interestingly enough,
did you believe that? Do you believe that?
I actually do, because I've talked to Dennis. I've talked to Dennis, and he's said the same thing to me. And if you look at his history in the league now, he played for the Atlanta Hawks for 5 seasons early in his career. And since then, he's been on, I think, he's changed teams 6 times over the last 6 years. And he's a guy who, is a family man. He's got kids. He's got a wife. Doesn't necessarily or at least I don't think, likes moving around constantly every single year, even sooner than the year's over. Who would like that? And I think he's a guy that right now, more than anything, is looking to earn a next contract and looking to earn some stability and maybe have a long-term home in the NBA. So if he's saying he wants to stay with the Nets and he likes it here and he wants to build a long-term, home here, does he match the timeline? No. But do I believe him? Yeah. Like, I do believe that he wants some stability and he wants to be in somewhere for one place, some place for an extended period of time. So if you're talking about him, I do think that, I lean towards with him, that maybe them letting the year play out with him, because I'm not sure like what he's going to fetch in a trade. Like, he could probably, get you some seconds at the deadline, but then you got to worry about getting a whole nother point guard because you need somebody to play that position for you. So I think maybe those energies of the trades would more be focused towards a guy like Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith, where the Nets have a point guard who says he wants to be here. They're not really losing out on much, I don't think, by not trading him. And he can, provide some structure for some of the young guys in terms of what they're doing on the court. So that's kind of how I'm seeing that. And, I do think that Ben Simmons's, health issues, their lack of depth at point guard absolutely plays into that, where if they did have to trade Schroder, they would have to find another point guard to, play that position and to have just functional lineups out there. So that's kind of how I'm looking at that situation.
My first thoughts are that is total bullshit. I'm sorry. I like Dennis Schroder. I love that he hustles and like he's one of these don't give a F type dudes. And then I'm looking at this offseason, right? And I'm realizing he may not make that much more money, and playing in a city that he likes, like Brooklyn, may be something that keeps him here. I'm going to read off a couple contracts, a couple point guards very quickly. All right, these are point guards who were free agents and what money they got. Chris Dunn, 3 years, $16 million. Chris Paul, 10. Aaron Holiday, 2 years, 10. You have Russell Westbrook, he made only 6. And then after that, you have Spencer Dinwiddie, who got the vets minimum, and all these other point guards, like a Tyrese Thomas, made even less. For a guy like we just talked about with the CBA, who isn't a big needle mover, I could see Dennis Schroder maybe staying in Brooklyn and kind of being, I don't want to say a lackey, but sort of helping break in the new point guard, whoever it may be. Who do you think is the new point guard if he's around somewhere?
You're saying this season or beyond this season?
Beyond, I'm saying that Dennis Schroder beyond this season could help break in the new point guard because there's not that much money around.
I mean, I think it's if you're looking at anybody on the roster, like I think people might say Cam Thomas, but he's not a point guard in my opinion. He's more of a combo guard. So that guy isn't on the roster right now. That's the thing. That's why they need Dennis Schroder, because they don't have another point guard. I mean, you're talking about who are the other true point guards on the roster? They don't really have one. I mean, Watford has ball handling capabilities and can play a little bit of a point forward, but he's not a point guard. Talking about Killian Hayes, I mean, he's a guy that has kind of become a punching bag for how terrible he's been in the NBA thus far. And they're trying to give a little bit of a reclamation, opportunity to, but he's not going to be their next piece at point guard that they're trying to bring along. So that guy's either, going to come in free agency, he's going to come via the draft, or, they're going to find another way to get a guy like that. So right now that guy isn't on the roster, which kind of underscores the need for Schroder and why I think that they're going to hold on to him.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to ask you some way too early predictions. First one, who is the surprise of training camp?
Surprise of training camp. That's a tough one because you can't say Noah Clowney or Jalen Wilson because I think those guys are past the point of surprising. I don't know, another guy who's on a flyer, let's say Zaire Williams comes in and impresses in training camp and, puts some pressure on the Nets to maybe give him some minutes. And that'll be an interesting situation because I told you that I don't necessarily expect those Cam Johnson or DFS trade situations to be resolved until December. And then you get a guy like Zaire Williams coming in. You already have Jalen Wilson on the wing. Derek Whitehead at some point is probably going to want to get some minutes. And then you got, Johnson, Finney-Smith, Williams. That's 5 wings. There's not enough, minutes to go around for all those guys. So say if Williams comes in, he's a guy who, is 6'9", 6'10" wingspan, athletic, has good defensive, good defensive chops, I think, but hasn't necessarily been able to develop his offensive game and, you know, have a consistent outside shot up to this point. Say he comes in, he looks good, he impresses, you know, is doing some things offensively. The Nets think they might have something. He's on an expiring contract right now, so they have some incentive to get him, you know, at least some minutes to see what they have. I think that could be an interesting situation. And he's a guy that obviously, like, they're trying to take a little bit of a flyer and a little bit of an upside swing on, picked him up for free. So I think that he's a guy that has some potential to have added opportunity. And, you know, while I don't think it's likely that he just turns into a different player at this point in his career, I think that he's a guy that a change of scenery made a lot of sense for and could add a little bit of a jolt to. So he's somebody that I'd be watching entering training camp.
Over or under 19 wins?
Right now, I'm gonna say over, like at like 21 wins, 20 wins, because that's really bad. But you know, until they trade away more guys, like they still have the talent on this team to win some games. Now, I think that'll probably change at the trade deadline, but at least for now, I'm gonna say over. But like they'll be right around that number.
Okay, this is very important. I will flame you if you get this wrong.
Okay.
What is your favorite Nets jersey? It could be throwback, New Jersey, Brooklyn, doesn't matter. What is your favorite Nets jersey of all time?
You're going to flame me if I get it wrong, meaning there is a right answer in your opinion.
Yes, correct.
Some people might like take some offense to. I'm not going to say it's my favorite jersey, but I think a very underrated Nets jersey is that 2022 City Edition, where it was like the navy blue, like hybrid kind of throwback jersey with the Nets. It said Nets in white, and it had the red stripe down the side, and like Harden and DeAndre Bembry, and it was like that year that those guys were wearing it. I really liked that jersey entering the season, and I think a lot of other people did, but that season was so miserable and everything went so wrong that season that everybody just hates that jersey now. But like, I think those jerseys were pretty clean. Like, I liked the kind of hybrid, like throwback, new era, like feel of those jerseys. And I really liked the colors and the pattern on it. But my favorite jersey of the Brooklyn era, I think, has been the black Cougie jersey, which I think a lot of people really like that jersey also. So the Nets have had some nice jerseys over the year. Like, I always like looking into the jerseys. I really like their statement jerseys from this past year, the ones that have the Jordan logo on it, and it's kind of just like black with the white.
The black on black.
Yeah, I like those. Those are pretty clean. I didn't like them actually when they came out, but then I saw them on the court, and I really liked them. The worst jerseys that they have worn by far, I think, are the Cause City Edition jerseys.
Correct. Yes.
Like they were drawn by like a 5-year-old. I hate those jerseys.
Boy.
I don't know what they were thinking. Like the court was okay, but during the games, I remember just like watching the games and watching them have those on. I was like, what the hell am I looking at right now? Like, it just bothered me. So those were ones that I did not like at all.
Eric, the answer is always the Dr. J jerseys. That's always. It's a classic. Come on.
That is a classic. That I was thinking Brooklyn era. Like, if we're gonna go back to the New Jersey.
I say New Jersey also for that reason. Okay. I try to warn you.
Those are a classic, and I do love those jerseys. And I thought that it was really cool that the Nets brought those jerseys back, you know, during the Brooklyn era, and we got to see like KD and some other guys wear those. I thought that was a really good job by the organization to finally, you know, kind of give some love and give a nod to New Jersey roots. And I'd love to see them bring back like the Jason Kidd, like just Nets jerseys from the Jersey days, like those regular ones, whether they brought back the, you know, the blue one, the navy blue ones, or those gray ones that they used to wear, like having them, the ones that said New Jersey across the chest. Like, I think that would be pretty cool, but I don't know if they'll actually do that. It seems like they've turned the page a little bit. It's funny you say that,
because Vince Carter's jersey is getting retired this year. All right, Eric, I know you got to go. Let's get your subs. Let's get your plugs in there. Subscribe.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like you said at the top, if you guys don't already, check out all my work on Clutch Points. My author profile is there. If you just type in Erik Slater, you know, hit up my podcast to the Bleav Network, Bleav in Nets. Also, I post all of that and other content on my YouTube channel at Erik Slater NBA, like film breakdowns, all my podcasts. interview clips, and then just follow me on Twitter at @ERIK'S_. A little bit of a dead period right now in the NBA offseason, so respect to you for, putting in the work and creating some content for everybody right now, but it's going to ramp up soon. Training camp's going to be coming up, and I'll be at, everything, have coverage of, preseason, all the training camp content that you guys need. So I appreciate you for having me on, man. And, I'd love to do it again sometime soon.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you making the time out for this. This is a post game of episode 85. I got a couple things I wanted to announce and talk to you guys about. I am now the beat writer covering the Nets for Off the Ball Network. You can check out my articles in the description box. I really need you guys' help. I'm making a push for something. And if you guys fuck with the podcast, fuck with me, please subscribe. Every view, every subscriber helps me. It's free 99. As always, you can follow me at NetFansYouKnow on Twitter. Obviously, you're on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Have a great day. Have a great night. Let's go Nets. I'm out.